Before we begin, take a moment. Not to prepare, not to fix anything, just pause. If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you've spent a lot of your life paying attention to others. Right now, you don't need to do that. You can just be here. Some people didn't grow up feeling rejected. They grew up feeling invisible. Not ignored in an obvious way, not pushed away, just not really seen. Growing up unseen doesn't always look dramatic. There wasn't always yelling or neglect that people could easily point to. Sometimes there was food, school, routine. On the outside, everything looked fine. But emotionally, no one was really attuned to you. No one noticed the quiet changes in your mood. No one asked what was going on beneath the surface. And when you tried to express something real, it either went unnoticed or was unintentionally dismissed. So eventually, you stopped trying. Children don't interpret this as, "My caregivers are emotionally unavailable." They interpret it as, "Something about me isn't important enough to notice." And that belief settles quietly into the nervous system. Here's something important to understand. Nothing about your response was wrong. It was intelligent. Your nervous system adapted to your environment. You learned to observe before acting, to sense the room before speaking, to feel other people before feeling yourself. You became perceptive, emotionally aware, careful. These traits often get praised later in life. People say things like, "You're so mature. You're easygoing. You don't ask for much." But what they don't see is the cost. Because underneath that calm exterior, there's often a constant internal scanning. A subtle question running in the background. Is it safe for me to exist as I am right now? Growing up unseen doesn't make you loud. It makes you self-editing. You think before you speak. You rehearse conversations in your head. You soften your needs before expressing them. You over-explain simple things because you're afraid of being misunderstood. You apologize for things that don't require apologies. And when someone pulls away, even slightly, your body reacts before your mind does. That tight feeling in your chest? That sudden urge to explain yourself? That temptation to fix the situation immediately? That's not weakness. That's conditioning. Why you learned to disappear. At some point, you learned that being too visible felt risky. So you learned to disappear. Not physically, but emotionally. You became the listener, the supporter, the understanding one. You learned to take care of others before checking in with yourself. And slowly, your own needs became quieter. Not because they vanished, but because you learned they wouldn't be met anyway. This is how self-abandonment begins. Not as a choice, but as a survival strategy. As an adult, this shows up in subtle ways. You might stay in relationships longer than you should, feel uncomfortable asking for reassurance, attract emotionally unavailable people, confuse intensity with connection, because inconsistency feels familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Calm can feel strange. Steady people might feel boring, not because they are, but because your nervous system isn't used to rest. It's used to waiting. Many people who grew up unseen pride themselves on being low maintenance. But often, that just means you learned not to expect much, not to ask, not to inconvenience anyone, not to take up space. Here's the truth. You don't have low needs. You learn to silence them. This isn't your fault. This is important to hear. You weren't invisible because you lacked value. You were invisible because the people around you didn't have the capacity to reflect you. And children don't grow from being told they matter. They grow from being felt. If no one mirrored your emotions back to you, how could you learn to trust them? If no one stayed present with your inner world, how could you feel safe sharing it? Being the strong one often means no one checks on you. Being emotionally intelligent often means you carry more than you should. And when you finally feel overwhelmed, you might feel guilty for it, like you failed at being easy. But strength without support eventually becomes exhaustion. Healing doesn't start with being louder. It doesn't start with finally saying everything you've been holding in. It doesn't start with confronting people or proving a point. It starts much quieter than that. Healing starts with honesty, but not the kind you perform for others, the kind you practice internally. It starts with noticing the small moments where you override yourself, moments so familiar you barely register them anymore. When someone asks how you're doing and you automatically say, "I'm fine," even though something inside you tightens. When you agree to something you don't actually want because saying no feels uncomfortable. When you feel hurt, but immediately talk yourself out of it, telling yourself, "It's not a big deal. They didn't mean it. I shouldn't feel this way." That's not emotional maturity. That's self-erasure dressed up as strength. Rebuilding self-trust means slowing down enough to catch those moments in real time, not to judge them, not to force yourself to act differently right away, just to notice, to say quietly, "Something in me is reacting. Something in me needs attention." Most people think self-trust is about confidence, but it's not. Self-trust is about relationship, the relationship you have with your own signals. When your body feels tense, do you listen or do you push through? When you feel discomfort, do you get curious or do you dismiss it? When you need reassurance, do you shame yourself for it or do you allow it? Self-trust is built in those tiny decisions, the ones no one else sees. When you pause instead of forcing yourself forward, when you acknowledge a feeling without fixing it, when you allow yourself to need without apology. And this can feel scary at first, because if you grew up unseen, your needs may feel unfamiliar, even inconvenient. You might worry that listening to yourself will make you selfish, or difficult, or too much. But ignoring yourself didn't make you peaceful. It just made you quiet. You don't need to earn being seen. Here's something many people need to hear more than once. You don't need to perform to deserve attention. You don't need to be interesting enough, calm enough, helpful enough. You don't need to package your emotions neatly to make them acceptable. You don't need to explain yourself perfectly for your experience to be valid. And you don't need to shrink to make other people comfortable. Belonging was never meant to cost you yourself. If you were taught that love comes with conditions, it makes sense that you learn to earn it. By being easy, by being understanding, by not asking for too much. But needing connection is not a flaw. Wanting consistency is not insecurity. Wanting to be chosen is not something you need to outgrow. It's human. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people. People who couldn't meet you without you disappearing first. If this video feels personal, it's because many people carry this quietly. They function. They succeed. They appear strong. But internally, they're still waiting to be seen. You're not broken. You adapted. And adaptation was necessary at the time. It kept you safe. But safety and aliveness are not the same thing. The good news is this: what you learn to do to survive can be gently unlearned. Not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, safely, on your own terms. This channel isn't about fixing you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's about helping you feel safe enough to stop disappearing, safe enough to listen to yourself, safe enough to take up space without proving you deserve it. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to harden. You don't have to lose your softness. You just have to stop leaving yourself behind. You were never invisible. You were just early.